Mayor Bruce Boyer of New Braunfels didn't send a letter or place a call. He appeared in person at the October 27 meeting of the San Antonio-Bexar County Metropolitan Planning Organization to express the concerns of his constituents about growth projections used by the MPO to justify massive toll road projects and the threat of subsequent merging of rural and urban Texas governmental entities such as the MPO. Boyer warned the MPO not to make plans based on their projections because rural growth depends on availability of water. No water, no growth. Little did he know that the Wimberley Valley Watershed Association and the Hayes Trinity Groundwater Conservation District were simultaneously issuing the following press release. Jacob's Well stops flowing. Emergency 30% reduction in water use is called for. In case you didn't know, Jacob's Well continued to flow through the record drought in the 1950s, is the barometer for the health of the Trinity Aquifer, and is the primary source of water flowing from the Trinity to form Cypress Creek. Let us not forget the famous words of Ben Franklin, "We will know the worth of water when the well runs dry."
You know, we're sitting here in a situation where the city of New Braunfels and a good part of Comal County could certainly be affected by the decisions that you all make. But nobody notified the city of New Braunfels that this was even taking place, or the county for that matter. And if it wasn't for our state representative, Nathan Macias, we would not know that this was happening. You know, in as much as the decision of this board, and I understand y'all aren't making that decision today, but eventually you will. And the idea that that decision could affect our population and the residents of Comal County in particular as well, frankly has people talking about having a New Braunfels Tea Party because they feel like there are decisions being made without representation, and that is something that we are concerned about. I won't go into a whole lot of detail with regards to the census projections that have been shown, but you know, there are some factors in all this. We keep talking about all the great growth we've had, and we have, and it's been dramatic. But until somebody figures out how we're going to have the water to support all these people, I'd like to see us relook at some of those demographic projections and find out how we're going to supply water to all these folks. Because I think that's going to have some limitation as we move forward. You know, that said, we're all for operating on a regionally cooperative basis. I know we have to do that. I know certainly we do. Gloria, with the air control or air quality committee that our Commissioner Jay Milliken chairs. You know, air doesn't stop at the county lines. Obviously, neither does traffic. So we know that there needs to be some regional cooperation as we plan forward. But the idea of regionalism, meaning that one part of the region, because of the population, is going to control what other parts of the region have to do, is something that I think we find our citizens, and especially in Comal County, aren't really going to be acceptable. I understand the system, I understand where the planning has to come from, but the idea that the board, even if there is representation on that board, won't have as much input as they may on their own individual or not individual, but our own local jurisdiction type situation is something that's very difficult for people in New Braunfels, but certainly in Comal County to accept. You know, Judge Shale is here, Danny Shale is here, and he and I have been talking about this for a week now because ever since this did come up, we have been inundated with emails. And I mean 40, 50 more a day from people who are very upset about the idea that San Antonio is going to tell New Braunfels and Comal County how they're going to have to plan for their roads. And I think y'all know where I'm headed with this. So I'm going to go ahead and get the four-letter word out there. You know, Comal County and along with the city of New Braunfels and TxDOT in our area, we've taken great pains to avoid the possibility of anybody even considering having toll roads in Comal County. Both Judge Shell and I are on record saying we're not doing it. It's not going to happen. So we came together with TxDOT on a pass-through program to get 46 expanded. And that project, the contracts are out, it's going to go, it's happening without having toll roads. And I know it's a very political issue, But when half our county sees toll roads coming out from San Antonio and Bexar County, you can imagine the furor over it, which may indicate why Representative Macias got involved and made sure that we were aware that the meeting was taking place. And I know y'all aren't talking about toll roads. It's a much broader planning process than that. I just want to go on record and let y'all know that it scares Comal County to death. A lot of these people moved out in that area because they don't want toll roads. They want to get away from that. Now, that said, we do want to cooperate on a regional basis. But I think what needs to be remembered in that regard is, yeah, New Braunfels is growing, Garden Ridge is certainly growing, other areas of Comal County. But at the same time, our county is very diversified, and in particular with people's attitudes towards government and how government operates to address their needs. And the idea that the folks in the more rural parts of our county may end up at some point in time being under the jurisdiction of the MPO is something that is very difficult for us to have to deal with, quite frankly. I want to address a couple of things in this report because I'm looking at the, let's see what the date on this is, July 9, 2007. It's a certification report, and there's some comments that are made in this report that I'm going to take issue with to some extent, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about falling under a jurisdiction without necessarily having the representation, at least at this point in the decision-making process. There's a comment in here that, and I'm going to take this a little bit out of context because it's in the middle of a paragraph, but it's a discussion with regards to the federal team that's doing the certification process and what else is happening in our area. Additionally, there were discussions regarding the possibility of the city of New Braunfels becoming an MPO now or waiting until the next census. That discussion didn't involve the city of New Braunfels at that point. New Braunfels is considering paying to have a census bureau do a count now to determine whether the city is an urbanized area over 50,000 in population and therefore must become an MPO. This is July of last year. I've been mayor since 2005. I have no idea where that statement came from. And it certainly wasn't an official statement on the part of the city of New Braunfels. Meetings having taken place to inform staff from New Braunfels about the pros, meetings have taken place. Now that's true. Sid has come and done a couple of presentations. And then it says it's the consensus of the transportation partners that at the MPO that New Braunfels ought to consider becoming part of the San Antonio, Bexar County MPO rather than forming their own. I respect that as far as somebody make a recommendation. But we're not one of those transportation partners, and nobody came to us and said, well, y'all consider this or not at the time this report was made. But the report says that that's going to be the case. We haven't decided. We don't have enough information yet. We don't know where we are in all this. To us, it's a pretty new process. I looked at the list of pros and cons of whether or not our area should be in the MPO. And again, we're all for regional cooperation, but I stress cooperation. We haven't had an opportunity to put together a list of pros and cons on behalf of our city or county as to whether or not we ought to be part of this particular organization. That said, I'm not here to comment on that today other than to say we are in favor of regional cooperation, and we do understand that the traffic doesn't stop at the jurisdictional lines. But at the same time, we would certainly want to have the opportunity to address that prior to any decision being made. And I don't know when and if y'all are going to do that. The only last thing I would say is, once again, I think that the population and demographic projections need to be looked at within the confines of not only our economic situation right now, which we may or may not come out of in the next year or two, plus the water problems we're going to have, and the non-attainment with regards to air quality. All those things may put a damper to some extent. They could depress the market for a while, which means that growth may or may not be taking place as far as the projections are concerned. And I find it interesting that everybody's talking about within the 20-year period, and the 20-year period ends in 2030. We're not at 2010 yet. Y'all have any questions? I'll be happy to try to answer any questions, but I'm not all that familiar. Yes, Tommy. Mr. Commissioner.